Chapter 3, The California Crush. The Pegasus was headed for Luna II, the former asteroid Juno. Now a Federation base, it had had a traumatic but pivotal history. The plan to move it to a lunar orbit had been announced in 0035 UC, but had taken 10 years to complete. It first had been mined and hacked at for resources, and the Federation forces had already begun fortifying it by 0067 UC when construction on Side 7 began. And then, in 1 week of January 0079 UC, when the Principality of Zeon simultaneously struck Sides 1, 2, 4, and 5, annihilating several hundred Federation colonies, Luna II was heavily bombarded with missiles, and any and all surface construction was shattered beyond recognition. Largely because of this attack, Federation forces were deprived of 1/3 of their entire fleet of ships before they could effectively resist. There was one exception. General Revel's fleet was on Side 5 at the time and managed to put up a fight, and because Zeon was unable to destroy them in its initial strikes, it was forced to throw much of its remaining forces into yet another attack. And this time the Federation forces rallied in a counterattack. The result was the first major fleet battle in outer space. The Battle of Room, as it came to be known, ended tragically in the nearly total devastation of Side 5 and the destruction of most of the warships in both the Zeon and the Federation fleets. For over 8 months afterward, the Federation forces frantically rebuilt Luna II and refurbished and expanded their fleet. Zeon similarly attempted to consolidate its position by constructing its Granada fortress on the Moon and its Solomon space fortress in the area where Side 1 had formerly existed. Several smaller strategic skirmishes continued throughout space as both forces attempted to expand the territory under their control. One of Zeon's strongholds was a giant, ultra-advanced satellite called California, which orbited on a 30-degree slant to the plane of the ecliptic. It served as base for a Zeon reconnaissance unit, and was primarily charged with scouting enemy movements on Earth and monitoring Federation activity on Luna II. To avoid direct enemy attacks from Luna II, it moved constantly in a random orbit and sowed as many Minovsky particles as possible in the vicinity. On California, a sallow-faced young captain, Garmazabi, read an electronic message from Lieutenant Commander Char. Have information on Federation Forces V strategy. Will drive White Base-class ship carrying new mobile suits into your area. Capture and destroy them. Will contact again. Not bad for the class valedictorian, Garma said, smiling and indulging in his habit of curling a lock of his bangs around his right index finger. Sounds like Char's going to bring me a little present. Garma, the youngest son of Degwin Zabi, had been 8 years old when his father had crowned himself sovereign of the Principality of Zeon. Whether from upbringing or from genetics, he grew up to be extremely indulgent of other people. If tolerance was his good quality, it also made him an ineffectual leader. Worse yet, he was far too immature for the level of responsibility he possessed as a result of his family connections. On California, instead of waiting until contacted again, as Char had recommended at the end of his message, he excitedly ordered Rear Admiral Zom, the nominal base commanding officer, to take off with 3 Gao attack carriers and intercept the Pegasus. Traveling at full speed, the Pegasus would normally take over 10 hours to reach Luna II from Side 7, so to divert the Federation ship from its course, the Musai periodically fired blasts at it from its twin megaparticle guns. In reality, the Musai had only 2 of its large TAM missiles left, but Ensign Braid was no match for Char's experience, so the Musai's feints worked, with the result that both ships proceeded on a zigzag course just as Char had planned. If California wasn't in its southerly orbit now, we'd never be able to pull this off, Char said, laughing, to Dren on the bridge of the Musai. You really think it'll work, sir? Dren asked, unable to conceal his nervousness about the plan. They say the Federation ship has an awful lot of firepower. Well, it's working right now, isn't it? Char retorted. Then, turning to the beat-nosed skipper of the Musai for a change, he added, Isn't it, Heyman? As long as there was no threat to his own life, the captain had no problem with diversionary attacks. At the sound of his name, the captain blew his nose and laughed, but at Char's next words he fell silent, and the color drained from his face. Char commented, We'll probably lose a Musai in the process of testing the Fed's new military capability, but it can't be helped. I want the crew's combat rations increased. We're going to try to catch the Trojan horse at California." The Pegasus was in an unusual situation. In addition to its crew, it was carrying nearly 500 evacuees from Side 7. Normally, this would not have been permitted. 2 or 3 holes blasted in a colony such as Side 7 usually did not entail the loss of the cylinder's atmosphere or even require the total evacuation of its residents. Basic functions would continue. Total malfunction was almost inconceivable. Solar-powered colonies such as the one at Side 7 were almost perpetual motion machines. Once activated, their ecosystems went through their natural cycles, and basic materials were largely recycled. Being man-made, they would not last forever, but as long as the sun continued to shine, they were exceedingly stable environments, especially compared to the permanent energy crisis on Earth. Their future was also guaranteed by the Treaty of the Antarctic, which both the Zeon and Federation governments had signed after the carnage of the one-week battle. The depopulation caused by the war had terrified both parties so much, they had agreed not to completely destroy each other's colonies. Frau Bow moved to the gravity sector of the Pegasus and busied herself treating the injured. She was becoming inured to it now, and open wounds and exposed organs were no longer a shock. "Get me some Type A and Type AB blood for transfusion," said Samara, the nervous, bespectacled medic, to Frau. "There's got to be some left." Jumping over the bodies of several wounded soldiers, Frau ran to the ship's blood bank as asked. Along the way, she could not help thinking what a horrible situation the ship seemed to be in. It was supposed to be a warship, but she saw so few military men in the sector, she wondered how in the world the Federation could ever win the war, and she was irritated by the fact that she had absolutely no idea where they were headed. "I wonder where Amuro is," she thought. It occurred to her that he might have been killed. She had known him, after all, not as a particularly strong boy, but as one who always needed someone to keep an eye on him. But she swept the thought out of her mind, remembering how he had looked when he had opened the Gundam hatch to greet her back at Side 7. Amuro was now a full-fledged military man. At the half-empty blood bank, she picked up 2 bottles of the blood type requested and started to return to the room where the medic was. Along the way, she was startled. In among a crowd of civilians milling about, she heard children crying and saw a young boy, certainly under 10, trying to calm 2 even younger children while sniffling himself. "My mom." The oldest boy started to say something but then began weeping uncontrollably. It was almost as though the gentle sound of Frau's voice had broken the dam of his pent-up tears. "Now, you just wait here," Frau soothed. "I'll go look for all of your parents later." She took them into what seemed like an officer's vacant quarters, had them sit down and, after comforting them again, started running back to the medic with the blood. They bawled mightily when she left, but that somehow reassured her. With that much energy in their lungs, she knew they would be all right. Besides, despite their own tears, the 2 older boys had tried to comfort the little girl. Somewhere she thought she had seen the girl before. On the sub-bridge of the Pegasus, Ensign Bright remarked to Selah Mass, "You're just what we need. We're incredibly short-handed. All you'll have to do is relay any messages that come in from Luna 2 or Side 7. I'll take care of most of the calls inside the ship, but I could sure use your help when things really get hectic around here." Bright should have been strapped in the captain's chair, but he felt better talking while standing. Selah answered, "Understood, sir." Then she floated over to the communications panel on the right side of the bridge. An enlisted man drifted by her, his head covered with blood from a wound. For a second she thought he was smiling at her, but then she realized the expression was frozen. He was dead. The communications panel had 5 monitors on it, and Selah had no way of knowing which section of the Pegasus he showed, nor, if there was any voice contact, did she know how to prioritize it. The main laser communications channel appeared to be open but was silent. Then she saw a close-up of a cadet's face on one of the right-hand monitors, and he seemed to be yelling. She pressed the button activating his voice channel. "I finished readying the gun cannon," yelled an awfully impatient young man of mixed ethnic background. "Now what?" "The ER. Gun cannon, you say?" Selah answered tentatively. Yeah. This is Ryu Jose. Right, I'm talking about my gun cannon. Sayla turned and called over to Bright, standing under the operator crane behind her. Sir, Mr. Ryu Jose says his gun cannon is ready. I don't mind standing by, Ryu snapped at Sayla from the little monitor, but I wanna know what the hell's going on. How are we doing? He wants to know how the battle's going. Sayla relayed. Tell him we're sending the information to the control room and for him to look at it there. Bright screamed, forsaking any politeness toward his newfound crew member. Turning to one of the operators perched on the bridge crane, he added, I want you to compile information on our status and send it to each combat sector. On the double. Yes, sir, Petty Officer Oscar Dublin called out with a gesture that looked almost like a salute. Watching the exchange between the two men, Sayla sensed that things were not going very well. Ryu Jose laughed bitterly in the monitor in front of Sayla and said, Well, I guess I just learned what I wanted to know by overhearing Bright's scream. By the way, I'm Chief Petty Officer Ryu Jose. I'd love to take you out on a date sometime. Rather than being put off by such forwardness over official communications channels, Sayla found herself staring at the image in the monitor in front of her. Was he half black and half Caucasian, or was he part Arab? She could not really tell, but when he smiled, his white teeth flashed beautifully against the dark tone of his skin. Well, she replied flirtatiously, maybe if I have the time. By the way, my name's Sayla Mass. Why did she say that? She was shocked by her own friendliness to a total stranger. Ryu's image said, We know you're a newcomer, Sayla, but hang in there. Then his monitor went blank, and almost on cue, a close-up of a different enlisted man appeared on a monitor on the far left of the panel. It was Petty Officer Mark Cran, the operator, calling out to Bright, Musai approaching at 7 o'clock below us at an angle 25 degrees. It's coming at us at maximum combat speed, sir. When she heard Mark's voice, Sayla looked up. Both the main bridge and sub-bridge ceilings had display screens built into them that showed a 300-degree panorama of the heavens. The balance, 60 degrees, could be seen on another monitor to her rear. You absolutely sure, Mark? Bright questioned. Images generated from laser sensor readings were useful even when there was a heavy Minovsky concentration, but they were only a simulation, a computer graphics model created by extrapolating from prior data corrected for Minovsky-induced errors. They were far less precise than the three-dimensional displays used in the days of uninterrupted radar, but they nonetheless gave an idea of what was going on. Without those models, a skipper like Bright, a rank amateur, would have been completely helpless. Launch mobile suits, Bright yelled into the bridge phone. Anti-aircraft units stand by. No, wait. Prepare for a direct ship attack. Looks like they've launched one of their mobile suits, sir, Mark said. Then interpreting his own reading, it's Azaku, the Red Comet. You absolutely sure, Bright said, again feeling a tinge of embarrassment because he kept asking the same question. He scanned a multi-screen display in front of him that monitored the inside of the ship. In the left corner screen, he could see the two gun cannons being loaded into the catapult mechanism. The Gundam was already poised for ejection. Bright grabbed the bridge phone and barked. Amuro, Char's on his way. Get ready to. Before Bright could finish his sentence, he heard a yes, sir, and saw the Gundam blast across the screen of his launch deck observation monitor. The mere sight of the mobile suit, fully equipped with its beam rifle and shield, made him feel better. The others were next. Chief Petty Officer Ryu Jose launching, sir. Chief Petty Officer Kai Scheiden taking off. As the two red-colored gun cannons soared out of Pegasus's portside hatch, Bright felt a lump form in his throat. Here he was, using trainees, still teenagers, as mobile suit pilots, sticking them in cockpits the mechamen called coffins, entrusting the defense of the Pegasus to them. Through the static, he could hear a fragment of a message from Amuro. Gundam intercepting Char, Musai heading straight under me. You'd better ready your stern missiles. The Musai was on a course that would take it beneath the Pegasus. Char, approaching ahead and slightly above the Musai and Zaku, apparently intended to take on all three Federation mobile suits. Bright yelled out a command. Elevation minus 2.5 degrees. Launch missiles in a fan pattern. 2 barrages. Mirai, gripping the ship's helm, glanced over and commented, "I hope our boys are a match for the Red Comet." Bright stared at her and said nothing. Why, he wondered, do women say things best left unsaid? Then Oscar's yell assaulted Bright's ears from above. "Our stern missiles missed, sir." 8 precious missiles had vanished into space. This time, Mark answered with a strained voice. "It looks like a TAM, sir." "Just one?" Bright demanded, immediately learning the answer. One of the multi-screens to his left clearly showed a computer-generated image of a single large TAM headed toward them, along with its estimated course and time of arrival. "Mirai," he barked out. "Initiate evasive maneuvers. Angle the ship up 19 degrees, hard starboard." The Pegasus's emergency alarm sounded, and the crew first felt the G-force with their legs. For humans used to weightlessness, it was not a pleasant sensation. The blood drained from their heads, and those with low blood pressure felt dizzy. The instrument monitor went into countdown mode, ticking off each hundredth of a second. When the readout reached 1.5 seconds, Bright looked out the window of the bridge and saw, with the naked eye, a bright white light bearing down on them. The sensors built into the bridge window detected the light and automatically activated a protective filter shutting out much of it, but it was still too bright to look at directly. The next moment, the entire Pegasus was suddenly tossed violently upward, and its metal frame screamed as it twisted. The crew members on the bridge wearing seatbelts hung on for dear life and prayed their bodies would not be severed at the waist. Mirai, standing at the helm when the blast hit, ricocheted back and forth between the ceiling and the floor 3 times and, had she not been wearing her normal suit, would have broken several bones. As it was, the shock was enough to kill some of the wounded soldiers on the ship. They had had no protection at all. Before the ship stopped shaking, Bright grabbed the phone built into the armrest of the captain's chair and yelled, "Main engines! Give me every ounce of speed you have. Maximum acceleration." Mirai, wincing from a blow to her chest, carefully monitored the gauge for the ship's main engines. It read 90% of the way to redline, but could conceivably go 35% higher. She realized what Bright was trying to do. Use the force of the blast to help accelerate the ship and escape from the combat area. "I wonder how our mobile suits are doing out there," Bright said, half to himself. To his surprise, a voice behind him rasped in an almost scolding tone. Don't worry about them." It was Captain Paolo. Fortunately, his gurney had been secured to the bottom of the bridge crane when the blast had occurred, but the restraining straps had ripped open his wounds, and the blankets covering him were soaked in blood. Turning to the ship's medic, Samaro, Bright yelled, "See to the captain." Then, speaking over the phone, he bellowed an order to the entire crew of the ship to inspect all stations for damage. A computer-generated image on a screen to his left displayed potential problem areas. The ship's external skin looked all right besides. Wall film, a viscous plastic film that could seal off most holes, would automatically go into action. But only humans could restore the equipment inside the ship, and any that had a direct effect on the ship's combat status would have to be fixed right away. Bright asked Mark, "How many TAM missiles does a Musai normally carry?" and felt a chill run up his spine when he instantly received the answer, "4, sir." Out in space, Lieutenant Commander Char had one weak spot in the way he attacked. The instant he fired his rifle, he would make his Zaku run in a straight line for 2 seconds. But Amuro, Kai, and Ryu were too inexperienced and too busy fighting for their lives to take advantage of the opportunity presented to them. Amuro would spot the comet-like streak of Char's Zaku in his center monitor, fix him in the sights of his rifle scope, and then fire. But the instant the beam left the gun barrel, his foe was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Char kept firing at him. Like the gun cannons, the Gundam wielded a shield for protection, but it was not armored heavily enough to withstand direct hits from a Zaku's 120mm rifle forever. It had already absorbed several rounds, and one more direct hit would render it useless. And Amuro's brain was reaching a state of overload. At 1. Point Char's Zaku came so close that its red mono eye seemed to fill Amuro's entire scope, and he reflexively screamed in terror. But then a miraculous thing happened. The Gundam moved with the agility of a trained fighter. Amuro kicked the Gundam's left leg forward and felt the impact as it connected with something. If he had had time to look, he could even have seen a readout on the instrument panel giving the force of the blow. Char was elated because he had caught the white mobile suit within a 1-kilometer range. If he could just destroy its head, he could knock out its main TV camera. He confidently fired again, but the cat-like mobile suit somehow managed to evade the burst. He cursed under his breath. At almost the same instant, he felt the impact above the ceiling of his cockpit. His center monitor went blank for a second, and the G-force threw him back into his seat. The white mobile suit incredibly had kicked his Zaku and smashed its head camera. The Zaku spun backward, and they call me the Red Comet? Char felt humiliated. Mobile suits had not been in use for very long, and his Zaku was certainly the first ever to be physically kicked by the enemy. Smoldering anger erupted into fury. "You won't get away with this," he screamed. His center monitor automatically switched over to an auxiliary camera and came to life again. 15 kilometers ahead, he could see the white mobile suit. Its beam rifle flashed again, but as usual missed. "Even a cruiser's beam cannon won't do you any good if you don't know how to aim," he yelled. But then a barrage of fire swept between the two dueling mobile suits. Kai and Ryu and the gun cannons had started firing in support of Amuro's Gundam. Outclassed in firepower, Char initiated a zigzag evasive maneuver. He knew he had to close in on the white mobile suit fast, but he also knew that his opponent was no sitting duck. With his ammunition running low, he started to feel impatient. "Incoming." "Tam!" yelled Mark, the operator on the Pegasus. "Launch AMs," Bright ordered, suddenly remembering the ship's anti-missile missiles. They might not hit the target, but they were better than nothing. Elsewhere in the Pegasus, Frau Bo's back throbbed in pain as she headed back to the officers' quarters where she had earlier deposited the 3 young children. When the Xeon missile explosion had rocked the ship earlier, she had been tending the injured with Samaro. One of the wounded had not had a restraining strap on him and had bounced back and forth several times between floor and ceiling, splattering the room with blood from his wounds. She had grabbed him and tried to restrain him and was now covered with his blood. Her blouse still soaked and her hands still slippery, she drifted along on the ship's lift grip. Her own pain paled in the memory of it all. "Well, you've been fine, haven't you?" she said to the children when she reached them. "Yeah. But..." The oldest boy started to say something through his sniffles when the ship's alarm sounded again. "Hurry! Put your seatbelts on," Frau said, seating the 3 children on the sofa in the officer's cabin and strapping them in. Then the Pegasus shuddered again. This time the explosion seemed even closer than before. The covers on the bunk in the room, normally fastened with Velcro, flew off, and the 3 children screamed in terror and pain. Seatbelts, even if made like restraining harnesses with 2 or 3 straps, dug deep into flesh. The younger boy's body slipped, and the strap around his chest pressed hard against his lungs. He began hacking. Then, as Frau and the children exclaimed in surprise, the emergency combat room lights went out. The little girl wiggled out of her seatbelt, crawled into Frau's lap, and clung to her in fear. She still had the softness of an infant, but Frau hugged her as hard as she could. In the semi-darkness of the room, she made a mental note of the emergency oxygen source, the video monitor that connected them to the bridge, and the ship-wide phone. "Everyone stay still now." Frau took off her seatbelt and tried to stand up, but the little girl would not let go. Feeling indulgent, Frau carried the child as she felt her way along the wall to the officer's desk. With a little light leaking in from the hallway, she could barely make out objects in the room. She needed a flashlight. She searched the desk, wondering who normally used it. There were only 2 ring binder notebooks in one drawer. Another contained the flashlight she sought, and a gun. "Maybe I'd better take it with me," she thought for a second, looking at the gun and then realizing she would never have an opportunity to use it. She picked up and switched on the flashlight, turned, and spoke to the boys on the sofa. "You know what?" she said. "I forgot to ask your names." My name's Katz Halloween," said one. I'm Retz Ko Huan, said the younger boy. Then, squinting in the glare of the flashlight, he asked in a worried tone, "Did you find my folks?" Fra, at a loss for an answer, felt herself panic. Ignoring him for the moment, she turned to the little girl. "And what's your name, honey?" she said. "Kika Kikamoto," she stated. Then she blurted, "You said you'd look for my mom." "I'm sorry," Fra apologized, trying to be as gentle as possible. "I haven't searched the whole ship, but when the fighting's over I can look some more." She wondered if there wasn't some easy way she could disengage from the kids. She had already looked through several of the ship's civilian areas, but had not run into any parents searching for these children. "They've made quite a nice course correction," Lieutenant Dren said, watching the Federation ship through binoculars from the bridge of the Moose Eye. One more blast from a TAM missile would make things perfect, but there were no more left. "I guess we'll just have to threaten them with our mega-particle cannon," Dren said. Dren knew that correct protocol required that they obtain some sort of permission from Dazzle Zabi's mobile assault forces before Char contacted California. But they were in the shoal zone, and Dazzle was on the Space Fortress Solomon, which was blocked by Earth. Laser transmission was impossible. "It all depends on how much one of those new Federation suits is worth," Heyman added. "If it's really so important to snare one, then arguments over turf will be irrelevant. If not, then Dren replied, I guess we'll just have pray its performance knocks our socks off." Against this, Heyman was at a loss for words. He turned his gaze to a computer display beside him, in a huff. How about that, Dren thought. He hates Char even more than I do. In war, there were always brave young men who distinguished themselves and soared in the ranks, and it was not easy to serve under them, especially when they were like Char Aznable, a young lieutenant commander, overly talented and overly deferential to his superiors. Social class had little meaning in the young Zeon hierarchy, but Char's attempt to reach California and deliver a present to Garma Zabi, his classmate from the officers' academy, was nonetheless the act of an overly ambitious ingrate. Someday Char would probably slip and show his true colors. Someday, Dren thought, Char's luck would surely run out. In his gun cannon, it was all Kai Scheiden could do to keep his balance. The suit's left leg had taken a direct hit and thrown off his sense of equilibrium. Then, through the static, he heard the faint voice of Ryu Jose in the other gun cannon saying, "That's enough. Withdraw. Withdraw. Where the hell to?" Kai screamed to himself in his cockpit in frustration. He had no idea where the Pegasus was. All laser search beams had been turned off because they were in an area where Char could attack at any moment. And Kai could not very well wander leisurely around in open space looking for the mothership. Ryu, for his part, tried to support Amuro by training his sights on Char's Zaku for the third time. He knew it was risky since the Red Comet tended to move in close to Amuro's Gundam, but he fired anyway. 3 times the 28-centimeter twin cannon on his suit's shoulders flared. Nothing happened, but at least he did not hit the Gundam. Then he took his eyes off his gun sight, and to his surprise, Char had disappeared. He activated his 360-degree monitoring camera and sent out laser sensors that traced the heavens. 30 seconds passed and nothing happened, but then something emitting an FOFID signal approached. It was the Gundam. Amuro's static-filled image and voice appeared in Ryu's cockpit. "To the Pegasus," it said. Ryu tried to query him. What happened to the Red Comet? Did he turn tail? He knew it was a dumb question. 3 state-of-the-art Federation mobile suits, after all, had gone after one Zaku and had not even scored a single near miss. Amuro made the Gundam hold up its shield so Ryu could see. Ryu whistled low in appreciation. "He did that to you?" 1/4 of the shield was gone, revealing a cross-section of its honeycomb construction. Ryu was impressed not only by the accuracy of Char's attacks, but by the fact that Amuro had been able to ward them off with the shield. To himself he muttered words he had heard recently. Maybe the guy's a new type. Char only retreated because he ran out of ammunition. Mirai's statement was delivered with such conviction that Bright felt compelled to ask how she knew. "Sure, Char lives up to his reputation of being a fearless pilot," she explained. "But I think he's a lot more than that. He's also a brilliant tactician. Look how he made those mincing little attacks on the Gundam. Seems to me he wasn't even trying to destroy it. I think he's just trying to gather information on it." As Mirai spoke, it also dawned on her that even if Char had run out of ammo, his decision to about-face had been too sudden. "You mean he seemed too in control?" Bright pushed. "Well, yes," Mirai said, hedging. "Seems odd, doesn't it?" Returning her gaze, Bright was impressed by how intelligent and perceptive she suddenly seemed. Then Mark, perched above on the operator crane, announced something that gave Bright a chill. "Sir," he said, "if we continue on our current course, we won't be able to descend toward Luna 2. Since loading the mobile suits on Side 7, Bright and the others had had no way of knowing the Pegasus's true assignment, as most of the ship's key officers had been killed in the initial attack. And now Captain Paolo was fading in and out of consciousness from losing too much blood, and unless he came to and told them, they would never know. Given his condition, returning to Luna 2 seemed the only logical choice, but every time the Pegasus tried to head toward the base, the Musai unleashed another beam attack. Unless they were prepared to confront the Zeon warship head-on, they would never make it. Bright? It was Amuro Ray, but he was not alone in wondering. More than 50 other crewmen were assembled in the room, all looking at Bright with the same worried expression on their faces. "For the last 3 hours," Bright explained, "we've been traveling at full speed, but we haven't been able to shake the Zeon ship. If, as it seems, they're trying to prevent us from landing on Luna 2, I had planned to take the Pegasus into a broad loop around it, turn our prow 180 degrees, and approach from the opposite direction. But I just recalled one thing. Zeon's base, California, is in the way." Hayato shouted out the next question. "You mean they might send some Gao attack carriers after us?" California was not a particularly large base, but to the inexperienced crew of the Pegasus, if it could dispatch 2 or 3 Gaos after them, it was terrifying. Then a crewman mentioned, "I heard Captain Garmazabi's in charge of California." A commotion ensued among the rest of those assembled. If they had been forced in range of Zeon's California base, and Degwin Zabi's youngest son was there, it had to have been part of a master plan by Char. Bright spoke bluntly. "We're all in this together, crew, and I need your opinion. Should we turn around and attack the Musai head-on, or try to scrape by California, use the Earth's gravity to boost our speed, and make it back to Luna 2? The first answer came from Mirai. "Let's turn around and face the Musai," she said. "If California hadn't been in Char's plans from the beginning, he wouldn't have attacked like he did earlier. And if the Musai had had enough firepower on board, it would have come at us a lot more aggressively." "I agree with Mirai," Ryu Jose said. "The Musai's probably out of ammo and probably outgunned by us, in which case we should attack it, and who knows how many Gaos they have on California." No one seemed to take issue with Ryu's assessment, so it appeared a consensus had been reached. After a pause, Bright turned and announced, "All crew don normal suits again? We'll reverse course and destroy the Musai ship. Then we'll head straight for Luna 2. The crowd assembled on the subbridge scattered. Next, Bright broadcast an appeal throughout the entire ship. Some civilians on board have had prior military training or are former military personnel. All of those to whom this applies, whether male or female, are hereby ordered to help in the defense of the ship. Infants, children, their adult guardians, and any wounded troops must immediately move to Ward E in the gravity sector. We will engage the Musai in 15 minutes. The subbridge fell silent. Taking advantage of the moment, Salamas turned and looked up at Bright. "Excuse me, sir, but isn't there a map of the layout of the Pegasus somewhere? I'm having a little trouble understanding what's going on." "We can display one for you on one of the top screens," Bright said, "but maybe Mark knows where there's a printed version. There should be one in the right-hand drawer over there." Mark replied. "Take a look." Following his directions, Sela finally found a document that graphically showed both the ship's layout and its internal communication channels. "Anyone want some coffee?" Bright asked. At the sound of the word, Sela realized how parched her throat was, but it was Oscar replied. "Who?" "Good idea," he said. "Let's send recruit Tamura down to the galley to bring us some." As if that were a signal, the crew members on the bridge fell silent and returned to their assignments. Before Sela had time to digest the new information she had been given, The communications monitors in front of her all suddenly sparked to life with questions, requests, and protests from people stationed throughout the ship. There were not enough normal suits to go around. What station to proceed to? Where was an assigned gun turret? The questions were all new to Sayla and were more than she could possibly have handled. All she could do was relay them to Bright. The rule of thumb on this ship, he explained, is that the officers stationed on each deck make those decisions. Tell them not to bother us with stuff like that. In the end, the only job Sayla could perform with confidence was to check the monitors, oversee the movement of civilians and wounded troops throughout the ship, and then relay the information to Samaro, the medic. 5 people in Sector 24 being moved to Ward E, she announced. No wounded among them. Immediately afterward, a young civilian woman appeared on a screen saying, "Hi, I'm Fra Bo. I've got 3 kids with me. How do I get to Ward E?" "Where are you currently located?" Sayla asked, thinking the woman looked awfully young to be their mother. "I'm in an officer's cabin," Fra reported. "Number 16, I think." In the midst of all this confusion, a gray-haired old man suddenly rushed into the subbridge area, yelling, "Where's the captain? What the hell's going on?" "What do you want?" Bright asked. I asked to see the captain, not an ensign," the intruder sniffed. "Captain Paolo's in a coma right now, sir," Bright replied. "I'm standing in for him." "You're taking over for Paolo Cassius as skipper?" The man was incredulous. "Yes, I am," Bright said, feeling irritated. "And what can I do for you?" "Listen," the man huffed. "I hope you're not serious about that earlier announcement, about taking on an enemy warship. In the condition we're in, it'd be madness." "We've no other choice, sir," Bright retorted. "If you've nothing further to say, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave the bridge." "I'm Jarma Amov's son," the man said, drawing himself up. "I may not know much about this ship, but I once commanded the heavy cruiser Buchanan. I'm here to help you." The old graybeard did look like he might have been a military man in his day, but he also looked like he could cause trouble. Bright decided he was probably a by-the-book ex-officer who had left the Buchanan after 10 years of service, unable to advance in the ranks beyond commander. "Times are different now," he said to the man. "The combat tactics we use these days are more like those of the pre-radar age. It's a whole new ball game." "I know that," Amov protested. Understood, Skipper." Reluctantly, the former commander turned around and started to leave. "There's a radar display in the command post," Bright called out after him. "But it's useless." The old man said nothing. He was wearing a normal suit and tottered as he reached out to grab the lift grip. For a moment it looked like he would not make it. For the ship's internal operations, Mark sometimes had an uncanny ability to remember every last detail, all the way down to the number of shells left. "Understood," Bright said. Then, turning to Mirai, he added, "Okay, let's turn this ship around." He switched his communications link to shipwide and wondered why the coffee was taking so long to arrive. "On the Musai," Lieutenant Dren announced. "Captain Garma's leading 3 Gao attack carriers, sir, and he'll be in firing range of the Federation ship 10 minutes from now." "Sounds like Garma," Shar answered. "The Gal'll never grow up. I think he wants to distinguish himself in battle, sir. You know how he always says he doesn't want to be a desk jockey type of leader." There was something about Dren's know-it-all look, Shar thought, that rubbed him the wrong way. He blurted out to the other man, "And that's why Xion'll never win this war against the Federation. Understand, Lieutenant?" The instant he uttered the last 2 words, he knew he had gone too far. Dren turned his back on him as if saying in silent accusation, "You're just as young and inexperienced as Garma, Lieutenant Commander." The younger a man, the more sensitive he is to perceived slights. If Shar differed at all from other people, it was in his normally superb self-control. Despite the fact that he was exceedingly young for his rank and responsibility, he possessed a type of maturity that gave him a powerful advantage in dealing with others and was especially useful in the Xeon forces. Garmazabi, on the other hand, had the typical psyche of someone his age, and it showed in his actions. "If Garma's leading 3 Gaus," Shar continued smoothly, totally ignoring the overtones of the conversation with Dren, "it means he has 18 DOP fighters. Here's hoping he can pull it off." Dren suddenly turned toward Char again, smiled, and said, "So if Captain Garma spots the Trojan horse first, he ought to be able to capture it, right?" "Sure," Char answered, deliberately being affable. "He's got a hyper-bazooka with him, doesn't he?" Dren punched a couple keys on a terminal in front of them and displayed an answer. "Yes, sir. But he only has 3 shells available, and all 3 are refurbished duds from the battle the day before yesterday. That tells me enough," Char announced. "I'm going out to help him." When he estimated that Garma's Gao attack carrier had launched its DOP fighters, Char took off in his Zaku. A Gao was 50 meters long by 60 meters wide and actually looked more like a fat rounded aircraft than what used to be called a carrier on Earth. The main fuselage carried 5 mobile suits. The front part of each wing section had bays that contained 4 DOP space fighter bombers. The aft part of the wing section flared into giant nozzles which, when the twin nuclear fusion engines were on full power, could propel the ship at twice the speed of a normal cruiser. The ship was also equipped with 2 mega-particle cannons. The DOP fighter carried by the Gaus was one of the first fighters developed by Zeon, and had first been put into operation when Minovsky particles were still largely a rumor. It bore a resemblance to the 20th century craft of the same name. The cockpit was stacked on top of the engines, giving the fighter a rather quaint silhouette but providing the pilot with a superb field of vision in dogfights, where it was generally believed DOPs easily outclassed the Federation Flying Manta fighters. But in terms of modern firepower, the DOP was pathetically under-equipped. It had only Vulcan guns and small missiles. Dren had tried to stop Char when he had first announced he was going to help Garma. If there was a heavy concentration of Minovsky particles in the area, he feared friendly machines might misinterpret Char's Zaku's FOF ID signals, own forces. But Char had sniffed at the idea, saying, "How can I possibly play the coward now, Dren, when Garma's always been my friend? I want to help him out by ramming as many bazooka rockets as I can into the Trojan horse. I want to make the guy look good." Realizing that the crew of the Pegasus had resolved to turn about, take on the Musai, and break through to Luna II, Char found himself sympathizing with the captain of the enemy ship. He's too late, he thought. 30 minutes earlier, and he would have only faced the Musai with its single mobile suit, and he might have had a chance. The 18 DOP fighter bombers from the Gaus, each equipped with 4 limb anti-ship missiles, 2 classes under a TAM, could turn on a dime. With them dodging fire from the Pegasus's gun turrets while boring down on the ship, and with blasts from the twin megaparticle cannons on each Gao carrier, it should have been easy to deliver a fatal blow. But 10 minutes later, the error in Garma's carefully laid plans was revealed. 6 particle beams from the 3 Gaus streaked toward the Pegasus, but somehow, with stunning agility, she managed to evade them. Even Mirai, manning the Pegasus helm, could not explain it. She had not relied on directions from the ship operators, Mark and Oscar. To her surprise, she had merely noticed a strange feeling piercing her body, and she had piloted the ship as if to avoid it. But even Bright, watching the enemy's particle beams zip by on either side of the ship, marveled at the speed with which she reacted. It occurred to him then that, if she could just keep it up, they might even be able to trick the enemy into blasting each other out of the sky. The 3 mobile suits launched from the Pegasus, the Gundam and 2 gun cannons, squared off against the DOPs attacking from the Pegasus's port side. If used right, the explosive shells fired from the gun cannon's shoulders could take out more than 1 DOP, and sure enough, when Ryu fired, he turned 3 of them into stardust. "Hooray!" Ryu yelled, having scored the first kill. Hayato Kobayashi was standing in for Kai Shiden as pilot of the other gun cannon. Like Ryu, rather than use its handheld beam rifle, he chose to fire the cannons built into the MS's shoulders and immediately knocked out 2 more DOPs. The Gundam, for its part, destroyed another 2. Fortunately for Char, his Zaku managed to approach the Pegasus without being hit by friendly fire. Weaving through the blasts from the Federation ship, he executed his famed multiple S-shaped maneuver, and then headed straight toward the ship's blind spot, its underbelly. He held his fire. The bottoms of Federation ships were built with reinforced armor that no Zaku bazooka or rifle had ever managed to pierce. He therefore moved around from the ship's belly, almost creasing the side of the ship, trying to head first for the bridge, then for the main engine's magnetic core. Both sections were practically devoid of armor, and 2 blasts from his bazooka could put the ship out of action. As soon as he was in position, Char sighted on the bridge. Then something impossible happened. At almost the same instant Char had the bridge in his rifle scope, a white Federation mobile suit slipped into view like a dog following a scent. Stunned, he felt a moment of real fear, but he was not called a Xeon ace for nothing. Fear became anger. He yelled out loud from inside his cockpit. "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" It was not supposed to have happened. He had closed in on the ship's blind side and maneuvered his red Zaku into striking distance so fast that no one should have noticed. By the time they did see him, they should have been pulverized. But there was his nemesis, the white mobile suit, again. It caught the first shell he fired with its shield and appeared to shake violently, but that was all. Then it lifted up the beam rifle it had in its right hand and moved as if to draw a bead on his Zaku. Char gritted his teeth and fired his bazooka again. The white MS's beam rifle also flared. It must have been sheer luck, but the beam from the enemy rifle vaporized the rocket Char fired and merely creased the top of his Zaku. A few particles diffusing on the edge of the beam burned part of the shield on his Zaku's left shoulder. It still looked fine, but he knew it was useless. Millions of tiny holes invisible to the naked eye had been blasted in it. Only one more shell left, Char thought to himself. He felt the same fear he had felt the first time he had gone into combat, when he had narrowly missed a Federation flying Manta fighter bomber. The 16-meter giant white mobile suit came at Char at high speed, and he could almost sense the war cry of a seasoned pilot radiate from inside it. Had he known that the pilot of the mobile suit, the Gundam, was a youth named Amuro Ray who had logged a grand total of 2 hours of flying time, he would have again suspected a true new type. But he had no way of knowing. The white mobile suit unleashed one more blast from its beam rifle. Char managed to evade it, but then saw the enemy MS's left arm, which carried a half-destroyed shield, reach behind its back. Something flashed, and for a second he thought he saw an explosion, but he was wrong. The flare of light from a beam saber swept toward him, aiming for a point right between his eyes. Under his face mask, he felt as though cold ice had been shoved against his brow. The main orthoscopic monitor in front of him automatically filtered out the overexposure, and there, on the darkened display, the white MS's eyes appeared to glare at him in mockery. Zaku's did not have beam sabers, although a month earlier Char had observed a test of a new Xeon mobile suit model, a Rick Dom that did. When its hand had connected with the saber hilt, a direct link was formed to the main engine, and the hilt then emitted particle beams, which, when focused, formed a beam of megaparticles over a dozen meters long, the blade of the saber. But in the demonstration Char had seen, the Rick Dom saber had lacked a filter of sufficient precision to contain the particle diffusion. The final beam blade was too broad. It still needed more work to be practical. The 16-meter-tall white mobile suit now in front of him was far beyond the experimental stage and looked like a human fencer with a saber in its hand. The beam blade had a sharply defined edge, and it was coming right at him. Char started to unsheath the heat axe built into his Zaku's waist, knowing full well that although it too was made for close-quarter combat, it was like a toy compared to the destructive power of beam sabers. Then he put his Zaku into reverse, and not just because he was outclassed by the enemy's weaponry. Despite the heavy Minovsky interference, he heard Garma's voice issuing orders, saying, "Dop fighters, pull back. Gauss, start countdown for the mega-particle cannons." Char was not dumb enough to let himself be blasted to smithereens by a barrage of friendly fire. Following a few of the surviving Dops, he quickly steered his Zaku out of the area. And then the impossible happened. 2 of the Gao carriers were destroyed. With its mega-particle cannon, the Federation ship scored a direct hit on the main engine of one, and the ensuing nuclear fusion explosion incinerated the entire ship, creating an enormous fireball that temporarily enveloped Garma's command ship. When Garma's Gao emerged from the inferno, it looked like a giant fire-spewing bird monster, with the jets on both wings on full thrust for maximum speed. Nose first, it plunged forward toward the Federation Trojan horse, looking for a moment as if planning to ram it. Char, watching from far off, felt helpless. He knew Garma was personally manning the helm. Only Garma, the brash young Zabi kid, would do such a crazy thing. His mind screamed, "Garma, stop!" But at the same instant another, utterly different thought flashed through his mind. Garma was, he looked after all, one of EDVR Toa, the R&D-TH Zabi family Musai. So he quat od not am if headied. Ake out his own the Federation ship was ship's shape and AH merely aiding his own quest for revenge. He should feel lucky. Darkness between the stars, but he knew Dren was doing his job. One after another, blasts from its mega particle cannon streaked toward the Federation Trojan horse. Still, to his amazement, the Trojan horse never received a single direct hit, despite being in the line of fire of both the Musai and the Garma's Gao. Perhaps, he thought for an instant, the Trojan horse was possessed by demonic forces. Yet another, even more chilling notion then occurred to him. Perhaps the entire crew were. A specially formed unit of new types. No, he reminded himself again, that would be impossible. The only people in the world who knew about new types were himself and Rear Admiral Cassilia, and Dr. Rome Flanagan of the Flanagan Agency. Suddenly, a beam of light pierced the prow of the Trojan horse. Even Char could see the ship shake violently, and as if on cue, the white mobile suit that had been dogging him reversed course. Char knew it was a useless gesture, but he fired his last bazooka rocket at it anyway, and the enemy pilot dodged it with ease. Although the area was heavily saturated with Minovsky particles, Char miraculously heard a transmission. It was intermittent and hard to make out amid the static, but it sounded like the voice of young Garma Zaba shouting glory to the Principality of Zeon. Glory to the Principality of Zeon? That's Garma, all right, Char thought, now convinced that his former classmate was at the helm. 20 kilometers out from the Trojan horse, Garma's Gao carrier caught 3 blasts from the enemy's mega particle cannon and turned into a ball of light. The image of a young man teasing a lock of his bangs with the fingers of his right hand flashed through Char's mind. Now, he realized with a twinge of sadness, Garma Zabi would carry that trait to his grave. In war, it occurred to him, the reward for Garma's type of overzealousness was death. Char signaled the order to retreat with his laser oscillator and began heading back to the Musai. 6 DOP fighters fell into line behind him, but he wondered if any of them would be able to make it to the Solomon base. It was odd how little he felt about Garma. He never would have made lieutenant commander without Garma's string pulling, but that was Garma's problem. At the academy, where Char had always been head of his class, Garma had often said, "I want you to be my staff officer in the future. I need you to stay alive till then, so don't do anything rash." With a growing sense of unease, he thought, Vice Admiral Dazzle Zabi won't be happy about this.